Hello everybody and welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tinkser. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders and entrepreneurs in the hospitality industry to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. In today's podcast, we are joined by Adam Knight, the founder of Proven Principles. Proven Principles is a consulting and coaching company built on the best practice of the luxury hotel industry. Adam helped customer service focused businesses to drive better performance, productivity and profitability. Adam has a wealth of experience working in the industry, and we sat down with him to talk about how successfully to run a hotel operation, the difference between good service and good hospitality, and the next big thing in hotel tech. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this great and insightful interview, so get ready to take notes and enjoy. Hello, Adam, and welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast. I'm really excited to have you on board today. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, but especially hospitality, I know.
Thank you, Michael. It's really great to be here. I appreciate you having me on.
Just for the listeners out there, you're in Boston. I'm in Brighton in the UK. So we're joining each other over this amazing things you can do on the internet today.
We're about as close as we can be, but being on different continents.
Yes, exactly. We met over actually LinkedIn, our shared passion for hospitality and especially people-driven hospitality. And then we had a couple of conversations and then we agreed it would be great to share these, stories with people out there that's also passionate about hospitality.
It's great to finally connect with you. I know that we've been trying to get this scheduled for a little while now, but I think over our few conversations and our several emails, we definitely have a shared passion for hospitality and serving people. And I hope that we can inspire a few people to do that today.
Adam, I think for other people out there, it would be great that you just tell a bit about your background, your story, as I call it, and what actually pulled you into hospitality and what is it that you're doing now to inspire and help hospitality leaders?
I have been in hospitality operations now for the better part of 25 years. And I had that realization where I counted up all the years the other day, and saying almost 25 years makes me feel fortunate that I've been in the industry for as long as I have, but it's an awful long time too. So looking back, it's been quite a great career. I started, born and raised in Canada, Western Canada, and I started as a pot washer in the Canadian Rockies at a ski resort all the way back in the 90s. And I went there straight out of high school. The one thing, when I was 18 that I knew for sure is I didn't want to go to university. So I moved away from home. I got a job at a ski resort. And honestly, I fell in love with the industry pretty quickly. Now, a lot of it had to do with getting a chance to interact with people from different parts of Canada at the time. I had never met people from the east coast of Canada, never had a lot of interaction with people from other countries up until that point. And so this position opened my eyes to the possibility of where the industry can take me. I finished up the season at the ski resort and I moved back to the city where I grew up, Edmonton, Alberta, and got a job as a bellman. Quickly moved into the front desk. And after a few years working at this hotel, realized I should probably formalize my education at this point. So I found a hotel management program in Victoria, British Columbia. Went to school there for 2 years. That program was so useful, so strong for me because I actually had 3-4 years worth of actual industry experience before starting the theoretical sort of schooling side of the education. So I was able to apply retroactively, I suppose, a lot of learnings in school to what I was doing. Wrapped up school, moved back to another city in Alberta, Calgary, Alberta, had a chance to work on the concierge, the private floor at a luxury downtown hotel. And then the company came to me with an international posting in Bermuda, and that's where things really took off. So my first international posting was Bermuda. I made my way to the US in 2003 to San Francisco, worked my way through the rooms division in San Francisco, moved up to Seattle, took on a rooms division role, and then flipped over to a food and beverage role, director of food and beverage at a downtown hotel in Seattle, which rounded out my experience to that point. So I then had the rooms division, I had some food and beverage experience, and I was able to take on my first number 2 role at a hotel down in Orange County, California. So did that for a little while, helped open a hotel in Pittsburgh, moved to the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., went back to the Caribbean, to Barbados for a little while, came back out west to California, to Orange County, moved up to San Francisco for a new role, and just about a month and a half ago, moved up to Seattle, where I am today. That's about 25 years in 2.5 minutes.
The US is a big country, but you've definitely been in different parts of it, that's for sure, and probably did work with very different operations as well. So what is it that you are doing today, Adam?
I wrapped up my last role in San Francisco and decided to start a company that did a couple of things. It helped a lot of these kind of smaller, I would say less, I'll use less sophisticated in air quotes because it certainly isn't for a lack of how they're delivering service, but it's maybe a less formalized or less professionalized hotel owners and managers that don't have the systems in place, that don't have the ability to create strong cultures in their organization, maybe for a lack of resources, maybe for a lack of knowledge. I saw a need in the industry for someone with a strong background in operations that can come in and help some of these smaller owners and operators. And that's how my company, Proven Principles, came to be. So Proven Principles started in the summer last year, and we've been working with clients now in hotels, restaurants, and even vacation rental owners to professionalize their operations.
So the next question will be quite obvious to me is, so what do you think is the magic bullet, the key principles of running a successful hotel operation?
You know, that's a great question. And after the journey I've had in my career, what it's come down to for me is how strong of a culture can you build internally inside your organization. You can have all the tools, you can have all the shiny new objects that you want, but if the people that deliver your product or service on the front line don't want to be there because they don't want to work for you as a manager, then everything is going to fall apart. So if you can't nail the internal culture piece down, you won't be successful.
How do you bring that alive? Do you have like a process or a model you use, or how is that all done?
It starts with many conversations over the course of, it could be a few days, it could be a few weeks, where I get to know the department manager, or maybe it's a general manager or an owner of a business, to just understand their perspective on running the business, to understand, the players, who they work with, who do they lean on to get work done, what are some of the constraints that they have, or maybe it's regarding recruiting, maybe there's, some people in the organization that have strong personalities that, a manager or an owner has trouble dealing with. So I try to get an understanding of kind of the lay of the land, as it were. And then the discussion starts to change into, well, how do you view yourself as a manager? Do you interact with your team in a command and control, a very authoritative way, and sort of demand respect because of your position? Or are you on the front lines talking to your staff, understanding the challenges that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, and really working with them to try to get things done? Your success as a leader in an organization is getting work done through other people. So you have to inspire your people to want to do that work for you. And the quickest way that you can do that is to start to shift your mindset to one that they don't work for you, but you work for them. And if you can get your mind around that and really put that into action on the floor on a day-to-day basis, you're going to start to see that cultural shift happen where people want to come to work. They're excited. They're inspired to come in and deliver on the mission.
I just want to grab on something that I think is very interesting to say, that you need to shift your mindset on, it's not them working for you, but it's the other way around. You work for them. And this is also what a really cool guy in the US called Simon Sinek, probably you know him, he says leaders eat last. Do you see that as a challenge within the industry, that there's a need for maybe changing mindset around how you perceive your employees in general?
I really do. And I've been fortunate enough to have been in the industry for long enough where I came up personally in a time in the industry where general managers were almost like the mayor of a city. As it were. So, let me explain what I mean by that. They would sort of breeze through a department. They would, shake a few guest hands and then come out, and they'd be big smiles, but they would be hard to get to. You'd never really be able to find them in the hotel if you needed something. There was very much a following the chain of command. So, you wouldn't go straight to the general manager. If you were in an entry level role, you'd go through your supervisor and maybe through your department manager. And that mentality of leadership, of being inaccessible and being not quite as engaged in the day-to-day functions of an operation, has changed over the last 10 to 15 years. It's had to change because, quite frankly, I think with younger generations getting into the industry, they're demanding that change. And what's been realized over time is that people, especially A players, the best people on your team, they want accessibility to senior leaders in an operation. They want to understand what's going on, and they want to understand how what they're doing on a day-to-day basis contributes to the overall goals of the organization. And the only way that they can get that information is to have access to senior leaders. So that change has been demanded over 10 or 15 years now, and it's just getting stronger. It's just getting more evident.
It's interesting you said there's a new generation that wants something different. They expect something different their employer. Do you see that there is a perception between young people that going into hospitality more now is a need, that I need to earn some money, than it is a bit like you got a bit of a calling? Maybe it's a bit too much to call it a calling, but you actually got really wanted to learn hospitality from the inside out, where you see it's a more transit environment now. There's something I take while I'm waiting for doing the next thing. And we know there's always been the case. There's people using it as an interim thing till they're done with their studies or something like that. But you see that it's becoming a less attractive, probably, as an industry.
Speaking from a North American perspective or maybe a US perspective, it has been difficult for employers to find great people. I don't think that that's unique here, and I don't think that's unique to hospitality. I think every industry deals with that. What we're seeing is there's more and more hotels opening in major markets in the country. There's more restaurants opening in major markets in the country. But there's the same group of people wanting to get into the industry. The pool of labor is not getting bigger, but the number of openings is growing at a pretty rapid rate. And what we're seeing is it's really almost like a job seekers market over here. So if you want to get into hospitality, you don't necessarily have to have experience, but you've got the talent and the desire to serve people and to contribute to experiences and be an ambassador of your city within a hotel organization. You can absolutely find great work and start an amazing career. Where I think the challenge is that hospitality and food service isn't, number one, always seen as a viable career path for people, or number two, people just, they don't want to get in at the ground floor and have to work the hours and work the weekends, miss the holidays, because they're working on the front lines in an industry that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I always tell new people when they're coming in, don't expect to have Christmas and New Year's off, because when everybody else is off, they're staying with us. And so we need you here. That style of work isn't always the most inspiring, especially for young people coming out of college, wanting to get into the industry. The other side of it is I think that hospitality is an industry that still prioritizes experience over education. You can have a great university degree, but if you don't have the personality and the talent to work with customers on the front line on a day-to-day basis, providing great service and wanting to craft an experience, you're going to have a hard time in the industry. It's still feasible for someone to come into hospitality with maybe high school or maybe a 2-year college degree and go very far because they have the talent. So it's a long answer, but I think it's a complicated answer. There's a lot of inputs going into why it's hard to hire great people today in hospitality.
And I agree with you that the pool has stayed the same. So we all fighting for the same talent, and we all fishing in that pool. And that also mean that people know that it actually sometimes they move around quicker than they did before. Which then does that your business become, a bit shakeable if you're not having your culture in place, because culture eats everything. And I think that it's quite interesting to see in the moment. A lot of people say that it's difficult to find people, and I always say to them, it's always been difficult. It's the same amount of people as you say we had 10 years ago that is out there and ready to work for you in the industry. But one of the things I've been thinking a bit about as well is that have the hospitality and restaurants as a industry not really moved with the normal development in society when it comes to approaches to things. There's a lot of industrial thinking, that's my view, sometimes happening in hospitality. And I think there's a time now to actually rethink that whole way of actually approaching your business, as you talked about before, having a different mindset.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a very old industry that has old practices and is one that has still sort of works off of the foundation that we do things this way because we've always done them this way. And that model, that way of thinking takes a really long time to change. And we're seeing it change. It's starting to come around. There's a lot of new interesting brands and interesting independent hotels that are coming out that are trying to shake up the industry, break the mold a little bit. But we still have a long way to go. There are a lot of large companies in the industry today, and changing how those companies do business, it's like turning a tanker ship, right? It just takes an awfully long time.
And it's quite interesting you mentioned the big companies because hospitality has a historical, when I started out, not been, a big company business. It's something that's actually changed a lot over the last 20 years, I would say. And it's probably the commercialization that the likes of McDonald's introduced into retail, restaurants, and hospitality in the 50s and 60s has really taken speed, both when it comes to hotels and restaurants over the last couple of years. And I guess that also have had an impact on how things are done, where before was more family-run businesses.
Completely. The one of the biggest changes that you see at the top, at the high levels of hotels, is the introduction of large institutional owners coming in and buying the asset and then hiring a management company to run the property for them. And that completely changes the game, because suddenly, when it's an asset as part of a portfolio, it has to perform for the owner. And how do they get it to perform? Well, they increase the value of the building by managing the P&L, right? Increasing sales and reducing costs. And so what happens is, over time, general managers, directors of operations, directors of sales and marketing, some of those executive level positions, they stop interacting with clients and guests and staff at the property, and they're in their office working on spreadsheets, trying to find the next way to work their way through a difficult month or a difficult quarter, or your revenue is not coming in as expected, so we've got to find it in the middle of the P&L somewhere. And that has just become almost commonplace in what we do today. It's taken the fun, the heart, the soul of what should be a very people-centric, what has always been a very people-centric and a very fun industry, and made it all about looking at Excel charts. And it's just not as fun as it used to be, but it's also just changed the feel of what it is that hospitality professionals do on a day-to-day basis.
It's quite interesting you're saying that. It actually touched on a conversation I had this morning with a very good friend of mine, Ivan Brewer from Australia, where we talked about how we have made it so complex of doing something we actually have done since, who knows when in history, serving people with food or beds in hotels, made it so complex to do because of spreadsheets. And he said, we have totally forgot about actually understand and feel the business. In a way, we manage a 2 spreadsheet, and it's good. And he said, to be profitable, you need to understand your numbers, but then you also need to put that layer of, you need to trust the front line and the feel of things to create that individual hotel. You can't compare the individual restaurant. You really need to go out and feel them to make them work.
You have to. Yeah. There are so many factors that impact the travel and tourism business. And, I have personally sat in and been at the head of a table of, many meetings over the years where hotel owners will come in and demand reasons or explanation and actions against an economic downturn in a city. Why is rate and occupancy down this month compared to same month last year? Meanwhile, there are literally an infinite number of inputs that can go into that, including, is your revenue management strategy on point, and are you keeping an eye on what your competitor is doing? Yes, that's a piece of it. But we all know what's going on in government these days and in the economy. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and that, I promise you, filters its way all the way down to how hotels are performing. And sometimes there's just things that there are forces at work that you don't have control over. So, rather than sitting in a boardroom getting beat up by a hotel owner because of, X, Y, and Z is going on that's out of your control, allow your senior leaders to get out and talk to guests and talk to staff and understand what's going on the ground, and make sure that the guests that you do have are really well taken care of, that your team is delivering on the mission. And that's how you're going to keep your property buoyant in difficult times. We haven't touched on online reviews yet, but right now, everything is so transparent. There are online review sites are becoming a dime a dozen. OTAs are becoming review sites. Review sites are becoming OTAs. And, there's SEO implications when it comes to reviews for your company. And on top of that, your employees can review you as an employer through other, online sites like Glassdoor is a big one that's used over here, where employees review their employer. Nothing is behind a curtain anymore. So you've got to be firing on all cylinders. But because guests and future employees can see everything that's going on in real time online, you've got to make sure that is a primary focus, to make sure that the message that's getting crafted and delivered to the public is one that you actually want out there.
I guess that comes back to your culture again. Your culture tells the story about who you are, both to the customers, but as well as to the current employees and people you want to attract in the future. And it started out with what you said in the beginning. That's where there often lies a challenge. How do you actually start to build this culture for your business? Or we can call it a brand as well, because many people think brand are built by, have some shiny objects hanging outside your door, some beautiful colors and some nice jargon on your website, but brands is actually built from the inside out. How do you approach that when you go into a smaller operation? How do you get them on board to start working on this? Because it's quite a dramatic shift in mind you need to have to start looking at your business in that way.
It is. And I don't want to misconstrue it. It's a difficult change because oftentimes it forces people, it's like a change in their paradigm. It's when I left work on Friday, I was looking at my business this way, and now I come in on Monday and I have to look at my business that way. It could be a difficult change for people to make. The way that we see success this way is to make sure that there's a good framework of not just high level leaders, but we go all the way down to the supervisory level and make sure that there are plenty of opportunities for every level of supervisor and manager to talk to their direct reports. And sometimes if it's appropriate, we try to have them go down 2 levels if there's 2 levels below them. So set up a framework where there are many opportunities over the course. It should never stop, but initially, over the course of a month or 2, and just do some data collection. Find out how people are doing, what's going on in the role, what are some pain points, what are the processes that someone at a desk somewhere put in place who they thought it was a good idea, but in practice on the floor, it's making it more difficult for customers to give you their money or for staff to deliver on the mission. And you've got to understand what those things are, get visibility at the ground level, and then once you have all of that information, you can start to prioritize the 3 to 6 actionable items that are out there. Maybe there's some low-hanging fruit, some processes that can be changed, some policies that can be changed. Maybe it's a scheduling change that can happen. Maybe the team needs a new tool, or a tool that they have doesn't work. So we've got to pull it out of use and introduce something else. Whatever those things are, make a list of some of those actionable items, 3 to 6 items, and then bring your entire team back together. You could do it department by department if you're a big enough operation, or bring the entire hotel together if you're smaller, or the restaurant, and put those actionable items up on a board and ask the team to vote on which are the 3 that they want to work on together as a group, because nothing is going to change if everybody isn't working towards the same thing. You're not going to change a culture by just having the general manager work on something. There has to be a community involvement in this process. So they decide which ones they want to work on as a hotel or as a restaurant, and then you start the process of methodically going through each one of those actionable items and making change to what they are. And then once you've made the change as a group, you communicate that back to the team afterwards, so they know, hey, you wanted us to do X, Y, and Z, and we completed X, Y, and Z as a group, and this has been the result of that change. So it's pretty comprehensive.
And it's quite interesting, the point you said with the importance of getting the front line involved, because a lot of people manage the business from the top and down and not the other way around, which you can call it bottom up or whatever you want. But if you really want to make that change, and we've seen that with clients as well, when they get the front line involved in the right way, they see massive change to the positive, and things are fixed quicker than they actually could have done themselves.
Yeah, they know better than you do sitting at a desk somewhere because they're on the ground with the customer hour after hour, day after day, right? So, first of all, so they're going to have a better ground truth than you are. They're going to know what's going on. The second side to that is that people want to know that their actions and their efforts are contributing to a larger organizational goal. They want to know that they're contributing to something. So when you give them a mission of fixing, whatever those elements are in the business that need to be fixed, it energizes them. They want to be a part of it.
Do you think, in general, in the industry, sometimes you have taken power away from the front line over time and actually starting to have more control mechanism in place instead of empowering people and get them permission to operate? You put so many rules and different processes in place that actually, you, in a way, just had make them, you almost to make them not feel value just by the way they can't make simple decisions about how to deliver great hospitality.
For sure. I think that there's a fine line between too many roadblocks in place and not enough roadblocks in place, because you don't want it to be a free for all, anarchy on the front line at the same time where everybody's doing their own thing. But what I do think that a manager has a responsibility to do is to make sure that almost have an evaluation period for when new processes or new steps or procedures are put in place to just see how it's working. I've had the experiences I'm sure listeners have had before where, and not to pick on an accounting department, but had experienced where something in accounting isn't working because of what's going on in the front line. So a procedure or a standard operating procedure is put together in accounting and it's slapped on the front desk and said, okay, you have to do this going forward. But the effect of that, yes, while it might make things easier in the back office, the effect of that is that check-in time takes a little bit longer, takes away from the interaction on the front line, and the guest is affected because there's extra steps involved now, or something they used to do they can't do anymore, and there's no good workaround on it. And that's a great example that happens all the time of a poorly thought out process because it's trying to fix one thing in the back, but there's consequences on the front line. And in hospitality, we are experts at that. So you have to have what I think is an evaluation period. If you want to do something, try it out on a trial basis, see if it's working, and if it's not, you have to fix it.
And it comes to coming back to hospitality, because I read one of your blog called Why It's Important to Define the Difference Between Service and Hospitality, because I think there's also something about understanding, because a lot of people talk about hospitality, but what I often see, they're not doing hospitality, they're just doing service in a way. But because in my world, it comes back again to your ability to empower people to do this. So can you try just to help us a bit about how you define service and hospitality and what is the difference?
Sure. The term service, it's almost in the title of our industry, service industry, right? It is a word that we use that covers a lot of bases. How many times have you been in a meeting where you're looking at your reviews or you're getting some guest feedback and you say to your team, we have to improve our service? What does that really mean? If you take a step back and understand what it is that what's your mission? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to deliver to your customers? And the act of delivering service is the act of doing something to someone. You're the one that's prescribing how that interaction is going to go. You are prescribing, these 10 steps that have to be performed, whenever you approach a table or whenever you check a guest in or whenever you help a guest with luggage to a room or park a car. You're prescribing how that sequence of events is going to go, and you're delivering that to somebody. That's service. The difference, the mindset shift, is that hospitality is the process of doing something for someone. So you're not doing something to someone, you're doing something for someone. That changes the interaction. Suddenly, when you understand that you're doing something for someone, you are reacting to how the conversation is going. You're working within that ebb and flow of an interaction, and you're tailoring how you're delivering what it is the guest is receiving based on their reaction. So service is doing something to someone. Hospitality is doing something for someone. It's much more emotionally engaging with a guest. It creates much more of a connection with your customer to your business. And if you can get your team to make that change, reviews go up, you get happier employees, and there's just some really beautiful things that start to happen.
And I guess also that you're going to be spending less time coming back to the culture and the management bit and getting the power to the front line. You're going to spend less time on managing people and developing them That's what you're saying as well. And I think that many people, there's many companies, the organization out there that talk about we create this hospitality organization. Why is it that you think there's very few that get this right? What is it? Because they all have the intent, but what goes wrong on that journey? They all have it in a strategy plan or a document or articulated that they want to do this, but actually they never really get this, hospitality feel. It is service they're providing.
Because they're in it for the wrong reason. Plain and simple. They're in it to make money. They write a strat plan, put it in a big binder, and it's a very fancy deck that they present to everybody, and everyone claps around the table. Yeah, this looks great. And then it goes into a binder and it goes on the shelf, and nobody ever does anything with it. Because what we're talking about today, it's hard. You have to get your hands into it. You've got to be engaged day to day, working with your customers and working with your staff. And that's a level of commitment and involvement that a lot of people don't want to do.
Is it because they don't know they don't want to do it? Is it because they just want to say the right thing so they can either get, promoted or achieve something else? They don't really care, as you say.
I think it's a combination of things. Some people don't know, some people don't care, some people don't have the time or the resources. It's a little bit of everything. At the end of the day, if your focus is only about putting together a great deck, great PowerPoint deck, presenting it, or only about how much revenue you're bringing in on the top line, then your focus is misaligned in developing a strong culture. It just won't happen.
Taking this, like you just said, you need resources to do this. And that means you need to, have time, and time costs money. Where we see the industry right now is that many are struggling with smaller margins and stuff like that. But interesting to hear your view on the industry from where you sit and see where it is right now and what you think the big challenges, because there are many challenges in my world. But what, from your point of view, what is the core challenges right now, and how do you see a way out of it?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? How do you see your way out of the challenges that are going on? Staffing absolutely is a challenge where we are here. There's so many jobs, and finding great people to fill those jobs is very difficult. I think the number of employers that I talk to that just say they can't find good people, as you stated earlier, I feel like we're having that conversation every day. I will say this, costs are rising. Cost of doing business is getting more expensive. The city of Seattle this year just instituted a $17 an hour minimum wage, which is very high for this country. Business owners in Seattle are trying to get their arms around, how do we fold that into our operations? How do we absorb this extra cost? We see minimum wages rising across the board. And that brings in another challenge with managers is the tide brings everybody up, right? You've got a higher minimum wage, but maybe you've got a housekeeper that's been working at your hotel for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Now their wage is just barely above the starting wage of someone who's coming in off the street today because minimum wage went up. So business owners are now trying to figure out, how do you properly compensate longer tenured employees with a rising minimum wage while not throwing off the wage scale across the rest of the property? So that's something right now that people are grappling with. It just continues to be a daily challenge. The other piece of it, the other thing that's out there is that there are a number of service providers. There are a lot of tools out there that want to insert themselves between the hotel general manager and the cash register. There's companies that'll come in and they'll take a percentage of sales to do this, or they'll take a flat fee every month to do that, or they'll take a certain number of dollars per key to provide this service. And it's incumbent on hotel operations to try to figure out, what are those valuable tools and services that are out there that are going to enhance our guest service, our experience for people, but also have an ROI, where we're not just bleeding money out, 0.5% at a time because these 3 or 4 providers want to insert themselves between us and our guests. There's many other challenges right now, but those are a couple of big ones that we're grappling with.
So I think, I guess, is also about, maybe going back a bit, like what I hear you saying, like, how can you approach things differently? Because I guess that thing where there's somebody taking a small fee of you comes into, also technology has become a bigger part of running hospitality businesses. And many people call this the saver of the industry. How is your view on technology and being the saver of the hospitality industry?
I think that technology has a place. there are tools out there that make it easier to manage your workflow, that make it easier to contact guests, to manage payroll, to do a lot of things, to manage schedules. There's a lot out there. Challenge, I think, lies in a few areas, is that it's not always evident which tool is better than the other, especially when there are multiple companies out there doing the same thing. And the other side of it is, we see data breaches now with some of these cloud providers. We see credit card fraud and stealing of card numbers because of data card or data center breaches. And as a business owner, as a manager, unfortunately, that's one of the things that you have to keep in the back of your mind when you're evaluating, which company that you're going to bring in to sort of act as a conduit for your guests. Because there could be things that happen down the line that you're not even anticipating today that could have catastrophic consequences for your business. There's a lot at play. You buy one product and a company gets taken over by another, and then they shut it down. So then you're forced to move to a new platform in 12 months when you just spent the last 12 months lifting this heavy new thing off the ground to get it up and running. I mean, there's a lot out there. So my advice, honestly, is that when you're evaluating new tools, take your time. I know there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people in your ear saying, buy this now. We'll give you this special if you get it today. You've got team members maybe clamoring for a new tool because something doesn't work, but you can't rush in. You've got to do your due diligence when you're evaluating new providers to come into your business. Because, as I mentioned, if you make the wrong choice, it could have pretty dire consequences.
So if there's anything in when it comes to tech, because I think tech is here to stay, and I think we need, as you say, evaluate it very closely and be very aware of what fits in our business, because it fits in the competitor's business or somebody else's down the street doesn't mean it fits in and that's the right decision to make. But in your view, what is the next big thing in hotels? What technology can really help and support operators? Because it takes some heavy lifting away when it's done right.
It does. There's two main ones that are out there that I think, I'm going to say two and a half out there that I think can make a really, really good impact. Number one, if your Wi-Fi in your building or your internet in your building, if you don't have a big bandwidth pipe coming in so that people can, do all the things with their laptop, their streaming devices that they want to do as they do when they're home, that's a big miss. You've got to look at internet today as a utility. It's no longer an amenity, right? It's no different than hot water and power in your building. So you've got to change your mindset. Charging for internet, we could probably go down that rabbit hole if you want to, but those days are gone. The expectation is that internet is, again, it's a utility. It's part of the package. You don't charge guests, directly for the water and the power that they use. Internet should be the same thing. Now, to tack onto that, streaming solutions in guest rooms where they can log in and watch Netflix when they're in their hotel room or whatever other streaming service they subscribe to. They've got to be able to do that on the TV in the guest room. They can do it at home, and people's expectation and when they come to a hotel is that they're going to have all the comforts of home that when they're on the road, they should be able to do that. So that's the internet and the streaming piece. The thing I think that's going to get the most traction as we go forward is a software platform that will allow for workflow management. And what I mean by that is, how does a guest request extra towels for their room, right? Well, traditionally what happens is that they call the front desk, call housekeeping or the hotel operator. They'll request the extra towels, and then that request will get relayed out to somebody. Hopefully they write it down or they remember that they have to take new towels up to this guest room, and then they go and do that task. And then hopefully they report back to the office that the task was done, so that the manager, the person manning the board, knows that request still isn't hanging out there, right? That's usually how it's been done in the past. Today, there's providers out there that will automate that whole process. So, and actually they'll take a lot of the staff interaction out of it. So the guest will be able to text the hotel, hey, bring more towels up to my room. And that'll go through a system where a work ticket will be created for an employee on the ground. They'll get an alert on their phone or on a communication device they carry around the property, and they'll be able to go and take care of that request and then acknowledge that it's been done immediately. And suddenly you've taken out multiple steps for the request to be lost, all of this back and forth, and it speeds up the service delivery of whatever it is that the guest is asking to do. Why that's beneficial is, number one, you're providing service faster. Number two, you're going to get a lot more analytical data to see when are the busy periods in your hotel? When are people requesting the most items? So that'll allow you to better manage your staffing and your scheduling. So if you have everybody scheduled, daytime or heavy scheduling in the morning, but most of your guests are gone and they come back at night and they're requesting items or they need things from different departments, but you've got a skeleton crew working in the PM because you thought without any data that everybody was busy in the morning time, suddenly you start to shift the delivery of service in the property and guests are better taken care of.
It's going to be all about, making the experience more smooth and trying to take away all these time wasters that's done or opportunities for forgetting things for the guests. Actually, that's where you see technology really is going to go in and add some value in hotels in the coming years.
Absolutely.
On our podcast, we always ask the people as on one last question. It would be great to hear what your one piece of advice would be to somebody, either a manager that is in hospitality or somebody that wants to join hospitality. You can take a bit of lead on what you want to talk about there. But what is your one piece of advice to people?
This is a people-centric business. You have to get out of your office. You have to go down and talk to the team on the front line. If you don't know the first names of the people that work for you, you've got to get out there and talk to them. Make sure that they know who you are and how they contribute to larger organizational goals. So get out, walk around, talk to your team, and you'll be amazed at the changes that happen.
That was absolutely amazing advice, Adam. I couldn't agree more. Hospitality starts and ends with your front line and the ability to perform out there. So again, thank you very much for your time hooking on from Boston today and talking about your experience and hospitality in general. Lots of great conversation here and more to come in the future, I'm sure. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, Adam.
Absolutely. Anytime, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing your extended knowledge on hospitality, hotel operation, leadership, and tech. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please give us a like, share, or even better, rate us on iTunes. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast with me, Michael Tingsager. Tune in next time for another industry interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us at hospitalitymavericks.com. Thanks for listening, and be Maverick.